It's a pretty sad state within the video game industry that there are game developers out there who are openly antagonistic towards the fan base. It's not enough that they're making decisions that fans don't want to play as, but they're actually deliberately trying to make decisions that they think will upset fans because they don't see video games as a medium of entertainment or as a product that they're selling to a customer. They see video games as just a platform that they can push their own agenda, and whether or not they actually sell, they don't seem to care so long as they got their message across and they can own the chuds and all that stuff. But apparently not all developers are like this, even from major studios. We got this story coming out where one of the directors for the upcoming Witcher 4 addressed many of the criticism being levied at the game as a result of Ciri being the main character instead of Geralt. And he actually has a good take on this, or at least somewhat of a good take. I think it could be better, but I do like what I'm hearing so far because he's not being openly antagonistic towards the fan base. And I know that's not really a high bar to clear, just saying someone who's producing a product isn't insulting the customer, but I will take the little victories where you can get them these days. The Witcher 4 narrative director responds to backlash over Ciri's promotion to Protagonist, says players' wish for more Geralt is valid. Far from choosing to denigrate those players who had hoped that The Witcher 4 would once again feature Geralt as its protagonist, The Witcher 4 narrative director Phillipp Weber has instead admitted that not only does he consider the disappointment over the hero's retirement to be valid, but that it's up to CD Projekt Red themselves to prove that Ciri will be a worthy protagonist. And if I'm going to give them some credit, or if I'm going to give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, so to speak, there's a lot of reasons why you would not have Geralt as the main character. One of them could just be they don't want to make the same game over and over. They want to do something different with each main release. I don't necessarily agree that this is the right move for that. I think if you wanted to experiment with Ciri as a protagonist, you should have made like maybe a cheaper game, kind of a spin-off game, not necessarily like a mainline type of game like this, a more stripped down version of it, and then just see if players are receptive to having Ciri as a protagonist in kind of an offshoot game. And if that does well, then maybe you can continue on. I think it's kind of a bold move to make the next mainline Witcher game have Ciri as the main character instead of Geralt. But if they really wanted to try something different with it, then I don't necessarily begrudge them for that, even if I personally disagree that it's the right move. But there are criticisms for this decision right there that I will get to in a moment. But first, let's look further into what he said, because these statements are coming from an interview that isn't necessarily released yet, but there has been some excerpts from it. In an excerpt from said interview provided to the public on December 18th on the topic of the Geralt Ciri protagonist switch, Weber asserted, "I think we definitely knew it could be controversial for some people because, of course," and I would say if you think it could be controversial or you know it could be a controversial decision, then you probably shouldn't be doing it to begin with. But again, if that's the case, then most studios won't try anything new, and every game every year will just be kind of like a reskinned version of the previous one. That's a lot of the criticism for many games like Call of Duty, for instance, where they just feel like they're the same thing over and over. Then when they get too far from what they were because they're trying something different, then the criticism is, okay, well, now you're just too different. It doesn't feel like it. And I'm one of those people who will complain about both those things too, because I do think there is a balance to be had with it. Like I said, I don't necessarily think changing Geralt or replacing Geralt with Ciri is necessarily the best move, but I can at least appreciate them trying to do something different as opposed to just re-releasing a more polished up version of The Witcher 3 again and slapping a 4 on the end of it. In the previous 3 Witcher games, Geralt was the protagonist, and I think everyone really loved playing as Geralt. I really loved playing as Geralt, he continued, so I think we're aware that if some people think right now that they would still prefer to be Geralt, I do think that's a legitimate concern. So if this is where the concern is coming from, that's valid. Now, this last little bit kind of gets me to question a little bit, because he's saying like, okay, I like playing as Geralt. People like playing as him. So if that's their concern because they can't play as him, that's valid. But that's not all the concern people have out there. A lot of people are pointing to the fact that they're replacing Geralt with Ciri as just another example within the video game industry about how studios are trying to replace men with female characters for the sake of equity. In fact, CD Projekt Red themselves, not only on games that they're producing, but also behind the scenes are trying to elevate women in gaming as opposed to elevate men. And I've said this before when it comes to studios pushing DEI and other things like that, that having those type of things in the game itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, but what it is, it's a signal that there's certain things going on behind the scenes at a studio, because if they're willing to push DEI in the actual public facing image of it, which is the games, then that it stands to reason that they're doing that behind the scenes. And when you're doing that behind the scenes, that means you're not necessarily hiring the best people for the job. You're just hiring the best people who check the right boxes. And we already know CD Projekt Red is guilty of doing that, which to me, that's the biggest red flag of all this, because we know they're doing that behind the scenes. So they're not hiring the best people for the jobs. And also they're pushing that at the front of the games. So I don't know. I'm just not confident that this game is going to live up to what Witcher 3 was. I think it's probably going to be a worse version of that, but I could be wrong. It's not worse because Ciri is the protagonist, but like I said, it's just an indicator that there are problems going on at the company, because they're looking too much on having female protagonists versus having the best person as the protagonist. He says that complaining that you can't play as Geralt is valid criticism. He doesn't say that replacing a male with a female character is valid criticism. That's just not being addressed here. I don't know if he's actually consciously aware of that, or if he's deliberately trying to phrase it so he doesn't have to call out DEI in the video game industry or not. And I can see other reasons why he'd be doing that, because if he endorsed it, then he'd be upsetting a lot of fans. If he denounced it, well, then he would also be upsetting his bosses. So there's kind of a fine line there, and he's definitely giving a political answer to this question in the interview. To this end, rather than berate upset fans for their preference or attempt to shame them into getting on board, Weber took the rare move of admitting that the onus of both endearing Ciri to players and ensuring that her story made sense lay completely on CD Projekt Red. The best thing that we can do, and I think this is really our goal, is to prove that with Ciri we can do a lot of interesting things, so we can really make it worth it, because this decision to have Ciri as a protagonist wasn't made yesterday. We started making this a very long time ago, said the narrative director. And this is something else when it comes to video game sets that take so long to develop. The climate within the industry, or at least what gamers were willing to put up with, has dramatically changed. In the past, people were willing to put up with a lot of DEI stuff if the game was actually good, or if it was from a franchise that they loved. But we've seen this last year that longstanding franchises can fail if they're pushing this stuff, because gamers are just tired of it. So maybe this decision was made at a time when they thought that they could get away with it, and now they won't. So he's trying to backpedal. But I do think it is good that he's trying to not antagonize the fan base, and I think this is going to help them a bit. I don't think it's going to make the game necessarily a success or a failure, what he's saying here, but I do think there are people out there who are kind of on the fence about these sort of things. And if you have the developer outright antagonizing the fan base, or saying like, well, we're glad you're mad, or if you don't like it, don't play our games. We've heard that in the past before, and it really hasn't helped these studios. So at least they're taking a different approach by acknowledging like, okay, we understand you're upset about this. This wasn't a decision we made lightly. We're trying to do something that we think will work. And if you give it a chance, then maybe you'll enjoy it. I think that's the right thing to say in this situation, but whether or not it actually plays out for them in the remains to be seen. But we'll have to see more for this. I don't think I think there's some people who are upset with this decision and are never going to come on board with that, and I think that's 100% fine. I think there are some people who are in the middle on this and be like, okay, well, if they're going to be a little bit gracious like this, then maybe I will give them a chance. This kind of reminds me of the first Sonic the Hedgehog movie. That's kind of on my mind since the third one is about to come out, where they had the bad CGI effects in the first trailer. A lot of fans were criticizing that. And the director, instead of being like, okay, well, screw you. I mean, we're making this how we want to make it. And if you don't like it, don't watch the movie. It's like, he didn't do that. He just said like, okay, we understand why people are complaining about this, so we'll do our best to try to fix it. I don't think they're going to do that when it comes to this game by trying to fix it, as in like go back and change out Ciri with Geralt. But at least they're doing something here, so I will give them credit for that. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Is this enough to make you, actually play this game? Because like I said, I think this is a good move, and it just goes to show that they understand that being antagonistic towards the fan base is not a good decision. So if this is the direction that things are shifting, I'm all on board with that. I just wish they would make stuff that isn't necessarily trying to push any type of political agenda, if that is in fact what they're doing with this, which by all likelihood, that looks like that's what they're doing with this. But also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.